Hi everyone, I'm Alice Morgan Clare. I'm the Assistant Educational Psychologist for the Mental Health Support Teams in Schools, and I would like to welcome you to our interactive webinar on supporting your child transition into secondary school. I also have my colleagues here with me, Tracy and Annie, and they'll introduce themselves later on. So, the aims of today are to provide an overview of the transition to secondary school, to identify common themes and thoughts that young people might experience in relation to secondary school transition, to briefly discuss anxiety and what you and your child need to know, and finally, to explore different ways to support your child through their transition to secondary school. So, we'll start off with an overview of the transition to secondary school. The transition to secondary school is just one of many transitions that young people will experience in their lives. Other examples might include starting school for the very first time when they're in reception, birth of new siblings, moving house, or even moving schools, for example, if they move area or up to juniors. The transition to secondary school is just the next transition in their life, and it's really important that we see transitions as a normal part of life. The more we experience these transitions, the more used to them we become, and the much higher our resilience is. I will now pass over to Tracy, who will give an overview of transitions and common thoughts that young people have.
Hi there, my name's Tracy Di Francesco Marino. I'm the Senior Mental Health Practitioner in the Mental Health Support Team in Schools in Crawley. First of all, I would like you to take a couple of minutes to identify some common thoughts that you think your son or daughter or other children in Year 6 might be having about their transition to secondary school. If you want to write those down or just think about what they might be, and then we'll move on. Okay, so these are some of the common thoughts that other people have identified. So they include things like, I might not make any friends, I'm worried about being the youngest in the school, where will I go for lunch? So some things that they might be really worried about. They also include some things that they might be really excited about. So a lot of Year 6s going into secondary school are quite excited about all the new science equipment or sports equipment or clubs, or having a chance to move around the school and have different experiences throughout the day. But there are also lots of common worries, such as thinking about getting lost in a bigger school and having difficulties making new friends. What is really helpful to do with your young person is to think about those thoughts and where in these three categories you might categorise the thoughts. So are they worries that your child has identified, or are they just simple questions that they don't know the answer to that you might be able to do some work together to find out, or are they things that they might be looking forward to? So as I said, they might be really excited about some things as well as having some worries. Okay, so we're now going to move on to think about making sense of anxiety, and I'm going to hand you over to Annie.
Hi there, my name is Annie Perry and I'm an education mental health practitioner in the Mental Health in Schools team in Crawley. So when we are talking about making sense of anxiety, a good place to start can be thinking about the physical symptoms we might experience when we are feeling worried or anxious. I'm sure all of us have experienced physical symptoms of anxiety, and it's likely that your child might also be experiencing some of these symptoms in the run-up to secondary school. So I'm just going to run through some of the common symptoms that we have in our bodies when we are feeling worried or anxious. So a really common one would be having a dry mouth and feeling like you can't really speak properly as you're so anxious. Another example might be your child's heart might be pounding really fast, or they might have difficulty breathing. They might be shaking or kind of feel the need to throw up or feel like they need to go to the toilet. They might feel a little bit dizzy or lightheaded and like they can't concentrate because they are so overwhelmed by that sense of anxiety or worry. You might notice that your child is a little bit tense, so they might be kind of clenching their fists, or you might just tell by their body language that they're not feeling very relaxed. And these are all symptoms of anxiety, potentially. And in the next slide, we're just going to talk a little bit more about why that happens. symptoms so we can understand those physical symptoms better. So why do we experience anxiety? It's because of something in our brains called the fight, flight or freeze response. When our brain senses danger, a specific part of it called the amygdala releases hormones which prepare our body to react by fighting what is scaring us, running away from it or freezing. Humans developed this response as cavemen because it was a much more dangerous time to live back then. They think running away from saber-toothed tigers or trying to hunt for food. The fight, flight or freeze response meant that cavemen's bodies went into survival mode whenever their brains sensed danger. So this meant their heart rate and blood pressure would increase so they had a better chance of running away, flight, or fighting the danger, fight. So for example, when your child feels anxious about changes in their lives, such as transitioning to secondary school, they might have angry or emotional outbursts during that run-up, and that might be their fight response to the perceived threat. Or they might try to avoid going to school completely because they don't want to face their fear, and that might be their body going into the flight response. They could also have difficulty speaking up when they start school, and that might be their freeze response to their anxiety that they're feeling. So how does knowing all of this help? Well, we now know what is happening in our body and that there is nothing wrong with us. Instead, our anxiety is actually trying to help us, even though it doesn't feel that way in the moment. It is important that you and your child understand this, as once we're able to understand anxiety, we can try to manage it. In fact, evidence shows that having a degree of anxiety can be helpful for us. This is the anxiety curve, and it demonstrates how anxiety can be helpful and unhelpful for us. So preferred anxiety, shown in the middle of the curve, can work to motivate and focus us. So an example of this could be if your child has to take a test and they do feel a degree of anxiety, so they prepare for it in advance in a helpful, kind of measured way. And that's when their anxiety is helpful for them, as it kind of helps them to motivate them because they really care about what they're doing. High levels of anxiety about changing schools could leave your child feeling completely overwhelmed and unable to focus at all, and that might have a really big impact on their well-being. The absence of anxiety at all can also be problematic, as your child may lack a sense of urgency or willingness to engage in necessary tasks. So at school they might have no urgency to complete homework tasks or things that they need to do, and that would be when having no anxiety at all is unhelpful for them. So now we know more about what anxiety is and why we experience it, we can start thinking about how you might support your child with the transition to secondary school and their feelings of anxiety and worry around doing so. The most important thing for your child to realise is that anxiety is a normal emotion. Everyone experiences it during their lives, including adults and their friends. Normalising this can be very helpful for children to see that they're not alone. So to help normalise this, you might tell them about something you felt anxious about but were able to overcome. So this might be starting a new job where you felt really anxious, but you were able to push through that anxiety and become really successful. You might also get them to think of times in their life that they felt scared about doing something, but were able to do it anyway. So that might be something simple like riding a bike, or even starting primary school. So it's possible that they might have felt really anxious or nervous before starting primary school, but once they did it, they had lots of positive experiences, they made some really good friends, and they were able to push through that anxiety and have a good experience. And there's no reason why secondary school can't be the same as that for them. The more open conversations that are had about anxiety, the less likely it is to feel overwhelming or scary for your child. So normalising and also validating your child's feelings can also help with statements such as, "I understand this is hard for you," or "It makes sense that you would be feeling this way." It's good for your child to realise that their feelings are valid and that most other children will be experiencing similar feelings and thoughts. You might also be feeling nervous about them starting a new school, and this is perfectly reasonable. They are your child and it is a big change. So remember to normalise and validate your own anxieties too. It's completely okay to feel the way you might do. So we're now going to be talking through some other strategies that you might use to help your child to manage their anxiety. So encouraging your child to do things that they find nerve-wracking or that they might usually rely on you to do can help to show them that they are more than capable of coping with these experiences, even though they find them anxiety-inducing. So it might be that your child is really worried about walking to school by themselves. So to help them deal with this and encourage them, you might think together about a plan on how you could build them up to do that slowly. So for example, the first step might be that they walk 1 minute on their own. And then after they've done so, they can see that they were able to do that, and that might encourage them to build up to the next step, which might be walking for a few more minutes on their own. And gradually increasing the amount of time that they're doing something and encouraging them and proving them that they can do that can be helpful for them to show that they are more than capable of doing these things, but they don't have to do it all at once. So building up slowly to things that scare them can be really effective. It might be that your child is worrying about making new friends. So to cope with this, you might try to arrange more social events for them to practice talking to people their own age. So this might be going to clubs after school or setting up more frequent play dates with their current friends, just so they familiarise with socialising again before they start secondary school. Getting your child to also consider the positives of secondary school can be really helpful. So it might be that they're feeling negative about secondary school. They might be comparing it to primary if they really loved their primary. But talking to them about the things that they're excited to try, so that might be new classes or clubs, that might be making new friends, might be doing sports or music, or things that they weren't able to do in primary school, can just help to raise those excitement levels about starting secondary school and reframe it for them in a more positive way. In secondary school, your child will be taught that kind of being independent is really important. And so you might want to help promote that independence at home before they start. So ideas to do this might be increasing their responsibilities at home. So that might include taking care of their personal belongings that you might normally look after for them. Or you might get them to plan where the family will go out on a day out. You could get them to look up some information for the family on the internet. And just giving them these small tasks will help them to feel more independent and promote the idea that being independent is a really great and exciting skill that they're going to develop in secondary school. So that can just be really helpful to show them that they are capable of doing things on their own and kind of encouraging them to take the initiative for themselves so that they can show that they can overcome things that scare them, even if it feels a little bit alien to them. All parents reassure their children, and it is an important part of being a parent and providing comfort to your child and letting them know that you're there for them. However, it is important to ask yourself whether your reassurance giving is helping your child to have a go at new things that they might be nervous about, or whether it's actually encouraging them to avoid their feared situations and thereby restricting their opportunities for independence. So if your child does not want to go into school in the first few weeks or is trying to avoid certain situations or events, it's important to give them support and comfort through reassurance, whilst also encouraging them to give it a go. As the more that they avoid things that scare them, the more likely they are to learn that something bad will happen if they do. So some examples of reassurance that is helpful or unhelpful are on the slide here. So reassurance which promotes opportunities for new experiences might be through statements such as, go on, have a go, you've done it before and it went really well. So I guess this is similar to reminding them of times that they felt anxious in the past and were able to overcome it through a reassurance statement. That might be better than saying, it's okay, mummy's here. Because the reality is that you might not be there when they are at secondary school and they'll have to learn to cope on their own and not rely on you to experience feeling okay. And so that might reduce their opportunities for trying new things. Another positive reassurance statement might be, I think you should see how it goes. I feel confident that your first day will go well. Even if it doesn't, we can think of what we can do to help make it better next time. So this is quite specific and it's instilling that confidence in them, still giving that reassurance and comfort, but also thinking about how it might not go brilliantly the first day. But if it doesn't, you can think together and plan together about how to make it better. And that might be better than saying, it'll be fine, don't worry, or I'm sure you'll make lots of friends straight away and your teachers will be really nice, as we don't know that that's definitely going to be your child's experience of that first day, and that kind of reassurance might not be so helpful for them. Another positive reassurance statement would be, I really think you can do this. I was so proud when you did this before. So again, thinking about a time that you were really proud of them and that they were really proud of themselves for doing something that they thought they couldn't do. And that might be particularly something they did on their own without you, to show that they are capable of being independent and they don't always need that reassurance from you to be successful. So I'm now going to be handing back to Tracy, who will talk more about how to manage your child's worries about starting secondary school.
Okay, so we're now going to move on and look at two different types of worries and to see what we can do about those worries. So the first section is around what if worries. So these are the kind of things that your son or daughter might say, what if I get lost? What if I don't make any friends? What if I don't like my teachers? And they're really things that we don't really have a lot of control over or we can't do anything about. So they might not be a solution to that problem, however many times we go over that worry in our head or however much we talk about it. And what we're going to do is look at what we do about those types of worries in a minute. The other type of worries is what we call problem worries. So these are usually things about a current situation that we can do something about. So although we can do something about it, what tends to happen is that we often put those worries off and they build up and then they can overwhelm us. And so it's sometimes useful thinking about the analogy of a bucket, and then each time we have a problem, it's like pouring a jug of water into that bucket. And the more that builds up and builds up, eventually all the worries get to the top, and then eventually that bucket overflows. And that links in with what Annie was saying about different emotions that might come out when we're really anxious or really worried about something. So what you might see is a display of different emotions where someone is either angry, quite upset, or whether they withdraw and sort of go into themselves. So what we don't want to do is for these worries to build up and be overwhelming for us. So what we need to think about is there a practical solution to these worries? And this links back to the categories I was talking about earlier. So is it a question type of worry or a question type of thought that your young person has? Or is it one of those kind of what if anxious thoughts that they can't do anything about? So one of the ways of looking at these types of worries is as an idea which is called the worry tree. So if your young person has been on previous transition workshops themselves, they might have covered this area, so they might be familiar with the worry tree, but it's all set out here. So the worry tree is to help you to manage those worries in simple steps, and it breaks them down into the two categories that we just talked about. So the first part of the worry tree is actually to notice the worry. So you might notice a change in your child's behaviour. So you might notice them becoming more withdrawn or becoming more frustrated or agitated or angry, but they may not have identified that as being due to a worry that they're having. So it's useful to try and explore that with your child and see if you can actually notice what it is that they're worrying about. The second step of the worry tree is to catch the worry, so catching it for later. And that can be done either by writing it down, drawing a picture, or making a note on your phone, or any method. It can be in a diary or just on a post-it note. The idea is that you say to yourself, right, I'm going to keep that worry, we're going to sort that out later, and what I want to do is make sure I've got a record of it. So the next step beyond that is when you spend the time talking about the worry. So you can call that worry time or talk time, and it's helpful if you can have that time, sort of special time with your child every day if possible. It only needs to be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, but it's quite containing for them in terms of those worries if they know that every single day they're going to be able to have that worry time. Ideally, not to have the worry time just before bed, because what we don't want is to then bring up things that they're worried about or anxious about just before they're trying to get to sleep. So if worries do come up at bedtime, it's a good idea to go back to the catch it stage and think, right, we're going to write these worries down And what we'll do is we'll talk about them tomorrow when we have our talk time or our worry time. So in the summer holidays, then you've got a bit more flexibility with when that worry time is. But as I say, ideally not bedtime. If your young person is at school when you're having the talk time, then it's ideal to let them get home from school, have 10 minutes to half an hour to kind of get over the school day, and then actually think about what's a good time to have this discussion. So it might be more around kind of dinner time, just before or after dinner. And as I say, for 10 minutes. So when you have the worry time, then you can take out the ones that you've written, that your child has written down or drawn a picture of, and go through them. And then the idea of that is to then think about which category do those worries fall into. So are they hypothetical? Are they what ifs? Are they something that your child can't do anything about? So if it is what if I get lost, or if it's what if I don't make any friends, then we'll say, well, we're not going to spend time taking up with this worry. We're going to go and do something else instead. So underneath it talks about letting the worry go. And later on, I'll give you some ideas about what you might do or your child might do instead of spending time with that worry. So they can, with the piece of paper, if they've written it down or drawn a picture, if they want to, screw the piece of paper up, scribble over it, and actually acknowledge, I can't do anything about this worry, so I don't want to spend time on it. The other type of worries, where we were talking about problem solving, are the more practical worries where you can do something about it. So if, for example, you don't know where the lunch hall is in school, can you think of some ways with your child about how you might come to an answer to that question or that worry? And it might be that you speak to somebody else that's been in the school. You might be looking at the school website, you might be asking one of the teachers, and we're going to look a little bit briefly in a minute at that problem solving process as well. And underneath the tree, it talks about refocusing your attention. So whichever way you're dealing with this worry, whether you're deciding to let it go or whether you're deciding to use the problem solving approach because of the nature of the worry, then after that's dealt with, you can refocus your attention and spend time on, or your child can spend time on what they want to do instead of spending time on the worry. So this is the practical problem solving table. So obviously on the left hand side you write down what the problem is, and then the second column is thinking of all the possible solutions that you can come up with, no matter how weird and wonderful, as it says there. So children can be really creative and inventive, so nothing is off limits here. Whatever they think might be a solution to that problem goes on the list. And then once you've got your list, which might have 2 things, 10 things on it, then you look at the pros of that solution and the cons of that solution, and is it doable? So there might be some really inventive, creative ones that just aren't practical for that particular problem. So these might then rate the plan, so 0 to 10, so out of 10, and then from that rating and from that is it doable, you then come up with the problem solving solution that you're going to use, and then you help your child, or they go ahead and put that problem solving solution into action. So it gives them a bit of control, and also you're starting with the basis that this is a problem that they can do something about, so they can get some success with this problem solving. This is what to do if the worry is a what if worry or a hypothetical worry and you want to let that worry go. You've acknowledged that the category it's in, you can't do anything about it. So what you do, as I said earlier, is either screw it up, throw it away, make a decision you're not going to spend time on the worry, and then think of other things that you want to do instead, or your child wants to do instead. So that can be absolutely anything that's, within reason and practical. So it's about them having time to do what they want and not giving into that worry and spending time worrying. So it might be playing games, writing a story, reading a book, having something to eat, talking to family, playing with pets, having a bath. But they can come up with as many solutions or alternative activities other than doing the worrying. This is just another idea that you could do with your son or daughter in thinking about their transition to secondary school. So the idea is that what you identify in the middle, so what is the same or similar in a primary school and a secondary school. You could do the circles so that that middle section is even bigger and the outsides are smaller. But ask your child, what is it about secondary school that you think is going to be very similar or the same as the school that you're at now? That might be to do with friends, because they might have a lot of their friends going with them into the same secondary school. It might be because they're going to still be learning maths and English. It might be because they still get break time, lunchtime, the structure of the day is very similar. They can come up with anything. It's just another tool really to use to think about. There are a lot of similarities, and not everything about secondary school is different and strange and anxiety provoking. And this one is, again, goes back to our original list of thoughts that children might be having about secondary school, which are often focused around worries about making friends or not having any friends or not having friends in their tutor group, that kind of thing. So they're just some top tips really. So it's a good thing to maybe go through these with your child and think about what they could use, what they might find helpful when they start secondary school. So things like asking questions is a really good one. So get them to think about what they could ask other people in order to start a conversation and make friends with them and find out more about other people in order to make friends. And obviously doing that with a smile helps other people to engage with you when you're doing that. It might be that you go to try new things, join a club. There'll be lots of things at secondary school that they haven't been able to do before in primary school. And talking about your own interests can help to engage with other people if you've got similar interests, or you decide together to join a club, and then you can make more friends from that as well. And then there's other things about how you might treat other people, so accepting that everyone's different, try to listen to other people, so that you show that you've got an interest in them. And then the bottom one is around identifying 3 interesting things about yourself that you could share. So that's it. You can use that as a little bit of preparation in advance before starting in the new school. So talk to your child about what they're interested in, what they would like to share with other people, what they think that other people might have in common with them. And you can do a little bit of preparation, even a bit of role play about what they might say or how they might ask another person some questions.
I hope you have found what Tracy and Annie shared really useful in terms of supporting your child and young person to transition into secondary school. Just before we finish, we've got some really handy resources that we wanted to share with you. So there's loads of helpful resources out there to help support your child through that transition to secondary school. One of these is a poster by Young Minds, and it's got 10 top tips to supporting your child, and lots of these centre around communication and reassurance for your child. Next, we have the Aneipheroid Transition Passport, and this is something that you could sit down and write out or draw out with your child. It's then to be passed on to their new class teacher to help them get to know the student, but also for your child to let the teacher know what they may be feeling comfortable in and less comfortable in, and areas that they might need a bit of extra support. The link here, and that will be in the bio as well, it has a link to a template of a passport that you can use. Another one from Aneipheroid is a booklet that they've put out for guidance for parents, and this also includes how to support your child to adapt to change, how to empower them and support them building relationships and friendships. Young Minds have also done some work with Year 7 students, and they've co-created a really lovely video where Year 7 spoke about their concerns and potential solutions to problems that they might have experienced during their transition into secondary school. And it shows their solutions and reassurance to this. This is targeted at children, so it might be something nice for you to watch alongside your child. Place to Be has guidance about the difference between attending primary and secondary school and how to prepare both yourself and your child for the transition to secondary school. BBC Bite Size also has a large collection of resources, videos, and blog style information aimed at your child, and it also includes information from students and teachers to make it more relatable. This can really help with an extra bit of reassurance and also a reminder that everyone will be experiencing similar worries. If you're still worried and you feel your child needs further support or you're particularly concerned, then don't forget that you can contact the new school. They are experts in transition and they most likely have had experience in dealing with most concerns and issues, so it will be a really good source of support and guidance. Thank you all so much for watching along our webinar of how to support your child with their transition to secondary school. We really hope you found it interesting and wish you the best of luck and your child with their transition to their new school.